Hi, everyone, and thanks for being here. I'm Esther de las Casas, Communications Lead at Mentabacus. It has been a while since we last posted on this channel. We used the holiday season to consolidate the project, a natural pause after an intense phase, particularly following the granting of the EPO patent. I'd like to take this opportunity to sincerely thank you for the many questions, thoughtful comments, and words of encouragement we received during that time. At its core, Mentabacus is about fostering a different way of learning, particularly in domains where abstract, verbal reasoning and the mind's natural story engine can be deliberately coordinated, allowing the strengths of both modes to reinforce one another in support of understanding and durable memory. One important part of that is the physical apparatus, which helps stabilize structure and memory and is protected by the patent. You can think of it as a scaffold for the mind, almost like an externalized cognitive module. Today's piece adds another perspective. In the article I'm about to read, Dan Vanden, the inventor of Mentabacus, steps back and looks at Mentabacus not just as an apparatus, but as a teaching framework, a way of thinking about how knowledge should be structured, introduced, developed, and only then deliberately anchored. Dan would normally introduce this himself, but this morning he's driving his son to the train station, a small, very real reminder that while trains may no longer be perfectly punctual around here, Dan's Sunday mornings are reliably full. So here I am again, reading his piece. I hope you enjoy it, and more importantly, that it sparks reflection on how we teach, not just on what we teach. The title is Why Memorizing Without Structure Doesn't Work. Mentabacus is often first perceived as a physical learning apparatus. That perception is correct, but incomplete. In reality, Mentabacus operates on three tightly connected levels: as a tangible apparatus, as a mechanism that bridges different think dialects, and as a teaching framework for anyone who needs to structure, explain, and transfer complex knowledge in education, professional training, onboarding, or instruction more broadly. At the most visible level, Mentabacus is a physical apparatus designed to externalize structure. It allows abstract relationships, typically expressed as diagrams, tables, or conceptual maps, to be placed in space. This spatialization is not aesthetic. It stabilizes structure, reduces cognitive load, and provides learners with a persistent reference frame. The apparatus does not store isolated facts. It stores relationships. In that sense, it functions less like a memory trick and more like a scaffold for structured thinking. Yet, focusing on the apparatus alone misses its deeper function. Mentabacus also operates as a think-dialect conflating mechanism. People naturally process information in different cognitive dialects. Some think primarily narratively, others visually, others structurally or symbolically. Traditional teaching and training environments often privilege one dominant mode, typically verbal or abstract, and leave others struggling to translate. Mentabacus deliberately forces convergence. A single learning unit integrates story, what happens, space, where it happens, structure, how elements relate, and symbolic anchors, items or triggers. These dialects are no longer alternatives. They collapse into one coherent mental representation. The learner does not have to switch modes. The system aligns narrative, spatial, and structural representations into a unified whole. This alone would already make Mentabacus useful, but its defining strength emerges at the third level, as a teaching framework. Crucially, Mentabacus is not something a teacher, instructor, or facilitator uses all the time. The framework begins well before the apparatus is ever touched. First comes intellectual discipline. A subject domain or unit must be deliberately structured. Core elements are identified, secondary details filtered out, and the knowledge is reduced to a single simplified diagram for the given unit. This diagram is not yet a memory object. It functions as a conceptual lighthouse, but at this stage, for the instructor only. The instructor then teaches toward this diagram. It silently structures sequencing, examples, explanations, and discussions. Often, the diagram is gradually co-constructed with the learners, allowing them to experience not just the final structure, but the logic of its emergence. At this stage, deep understanding already forms, without any physical Mentabacus involvement. Only then does the decisive question arise: is this structure fundamental enough to justify long-term anchoring? Not every diagram deserves to be stored. Mentabacus is intentionally selective. Mentabacus is deliberately optimized for domains of knowledge that can be expressed in simplified diagrammatic form, often recognizable by the fact that similar diagrams repeatedly appear in textbooks or online explanations of the field. Where a domain naturally produces such diagrams, Mentabacus can anchor them reliably. Where it does not, it should not be forced. When a diagram represents load-bearing knowledge, something learners will need to recall across contexts and over time, only then does the apparatus come into play. At this point, an important aspect becomes visible: slowness. Deliberate anchoring using the apparatus takes time. That is not a drawback. It is part of the mechanism. Mentabacus introduces front-loading and artificial slowness to signal importance to the mind. Abstract information, which is normally fleeting and hard to retain, is transformed into a guided, story engine-like process that unfolds step by step. This controlled pacing allows the mind to process structure as something concrete and experiential, and therefore memorable. What takes longer to encode becomes dramatically easier to recall. Just as importantly, the instructor decides when Mentabacus is not used. It is not a default mode, but a precision instrument. Used selectively, it preserves its cognitive impact and avoids over-mechanization. Seen this way, Mentabacus is not another learning gadget. It is a three-layer system: a physical stabilizer of abstract structure, a bridge between cognitive dialects, and a teaching framework that rewards clarity, selectivity, and intentional slowness. The teacher or instructor remains the architect. The apparatus merely ensures that what truly matters does not dissolve. And that was today's piece. Let's see whether Dan is back by now. One thing is certain: trying to retain complex knowledge without a structural scaffold is like planning a journey around train timetables these days. Technically available, but no longer something you can confidently build on. At least where we currently live. Mentabacus is one attempt to navigate that uncertainty by making structure explicit and by aligning learning a little more closely with the biological and psychological constraints of the human mind. Thank you for watching, and until next time. And last but not least, remember, as Dan always says, learning isn't a trend. Structure still works. Square, not hip.
Every story needs structure. Every mind needs a map. Mentabacus. Square, not hip. Visit us at mentabacus.com.